Welcome back to Selena's Table and our little Aussie homestead. I'm Selena if you're new here, and today I'm going to show you how to make tallow. Now you may have heard of tallow before, you may know what it is, but for those of you who don't know, tallow is the refined, rendered fat that is from usually beef. You can also get it from deer and things like that as well. And it is a cooking oil that has a high smoke point, full of vitamins and minerals. It contains vitamin A, D, E, K, and B12. If you're able to source grass-fed beef, that will be the richer fat in those vitamins and minerals, and it also does have anti-inflammatory properties. Now, I'm a big fan of tallow. I have been using it for many decades, 2 decades actually. Cooking, especially beautiful on your roast vegetables and things like that. Commercial kitchens love to use it. And up until probably 15 years ago, it was the primary fat that our potato chips and things like that used to be fried in, and then the switch was made over to the vegetable oils. I personally am not a fan of vegetable oils, but you know, we still eat them. We just prefer, where we can, to make choices, we will make choices. So at home, in our frying and things like that, I prefer to use an animal fat. Lard is another one, and lard I prefer with things like pastries and stuff like that. So lard is the exact same product but of a pig, okay? Now, so you know what tallow is if you didn't before, and you may be wondering, how the heck do I make it? Okay, so it's very, very easy. It is a little stinky, so I prefer to do it outside, and we will be today. What you need to do is find yourself a butcher who is happy to sell you some fat. Okay, this is my fat. So this is just a bag of fat that I've got in my freezer. The butcher sold it to me for the price of pet mince. So for me personally, I paid $5 a kilo for this. I actually think that might even be a little high. Some will give it away and others will sell it to you. But even at $5 a kilo, I'm going to get a really cheap cooking oil out of that, and I'm also going to make soap with it. So what do? We've got our fat, and you can see it's still got bits of contaminant on it. It's got a bit of blood. There's probably a little bit of meat and tissue in there. So this was frozen. So this is what you need. You need some fat from beef. You'll need some salt and some water. You'll also need, for my preferred method, now there are a few ways to do it, but my preferred method is in a slow cooker because it keeps the temperature nice and low. When working in commercial kitchens, I have done this using like a big stock pot, but I prefer, for the home cook, for doing it at home myself, I just use the slow cooker. So what I've got here is 2 kilos of raw beef fat. I am going to do this outside. I'm just going to prepare it inside because we are in spring and we are in Queensland and there will be flies attracted to this. So I will make sure that this is fly proof. You won't have to worry about it. You might want to keep pets away from it though. I'm not sure if they will try to get in there. It will be warm, so you know, hopefully we are not going to have a problem. But in a slow cooker, it needs to be big enough to hold all of your fat. So here I have 2 kilos of fat in there, straight into our slow cooker. 2 kilos seems to fit perfectly into this particular slow cooker, and it's what I can manage. Now what you'll notice is some of it has been finely ground up, and some of it is still sort of chunky. Now this is frozen, okay? So what I've done is I've bought it from the butcher. They didn't grind it for me. If you have a butcher that can or will grind for you, let them do that or ask them to do that for you. I forgot entirely to do that. So I brought it home and then I attempted to grind it myself, and that's why we have some small pieces here. It started to clog up my little grinder that I have, so I ended up just cutting it into smaller, manageable chunks. All right, and they have clumped together somewhat. So that's all I'm doing, is just sort of breaking up some of my clumps. But yeah, so you want to have at least sort of this size at its biggest. All right, and then the smaller, the easier and the quicker this will render down. So in this, I just cut it up, ground up what I did grind up, and I popped it in my freezer bag, and I've kept it in my freezer until today, until I'm ready. Now, if you cut beef fat off of other cuts of meat, like when you go to cook it and you don't want that fat on there, if you want to dice that up and pop it into your bag, you can do that as well, and just sort of slowly be building on your supply of your raw beef fat. You don't have to buy a heap of beef fat. You can slowly build up that store, but you do want to have a significant amount before you bother going through the process of rendering it, okay? I'm also going to use a stick blender in this. Now that's not necessary. You can get away with doing this without using one. The stick blender is going to speed this process up for me, and it's also going to just break down those larger chunks of fat so that we can really just get through this a bit quicker. Now into my beef fat, what I'm going to add is 6 to 8 cups of water. That's 4. I am going to make that up to 6. You also want to add a couple of tablespoons of salt. What the salt is going to do is draw out the impurities, so the colour, the blood bits, the beef that's left on there. It's going to draw them out and bring them into the water so that when we strain this, we're able to separate our water with particles and our fat, because all we want is the fat. Just like that. That's all we need to do. I will put a bit of alfoil over my slow cooker because the lid does have a hole in it, and I'm a little worried that a fly might get through there, and I don't want that. So a little bit of alfoil, and then we'll take it outside, turn it on, and that's all we need to do for stage 1 of making our own tallow. So there we have it. We are outside. So I have my slow cooker is plugged in here. I'm just going to pop that on low. Don't do this on high, do it on low. And then I'm just putting some alfoil over the top with the lid. So this will take a few hours for all that fat to melt down. Now, the amount of time isn't going to be the same every single time you do it either, but I'm going to aim for about 8 hours. You want to keep an eye on that it doesn't bubble. Now, if it bubbles and sort of starts boiling, I guess, in the pot there, what's going to happen is you will end up frying any of the little particles, so the meaty bits, the blood, things like that. And what that's going to do is actually impart a real roast beef flavor into your tallow. If you end up doing that by mistake, don't throw your tallow out. That tallow just won't be suitable for making cosmetics, soaps, things like that with. It still will be perfectly fine to use as a savory cooking oil. So if you do end up burning your tallow, essentially, just make sure you label it as savory cooking oil. Now that's what I've done to one of my batches in the past. This is how I know what I'm talking about. And that one does have a lovely roast beef smell to it when we cook with it, and it does just impart a bit more flavor when it comes to roast potatoes and things like that. However, because I'm wanting to make soap with this particular batch of tallow, or at least have the option to make soap with it, I do not want a roast beef soap. Okay, so generally tallow won't have much smell and it won't have much flavor, as far as you won't be able to tell where it came from. But yes, you want this to be low and a gentle melt. That's how we're going to get the product at the end that we're looking for. So I'm just going to leave this here on low. I will check on it periodically, and once it gets to a stage that I'm happy with, to show you what we do next, I will bring you along and show you what happens once we've been sitting here for a few hours and we've had a really good rendering down of the fat. All right, let's see where we're at with this fat. So it's been a couple of hours. Oops, and my foil just blew away. You can see we've got some melting going on. So now what I'm going to do is give this a blitz with a stick mixer. Okay, be careful that you don't spill this on yourself. It will be hot, but using a stick mixer, we just want to get some of that fat, blend it up, and make it look a little bit soupy, really. By doing this, it's going to speed the process up for us. Popped the lid back on with the foil. My blender stopped working, my little stick blender. That is totally an optional step anyway. So I've chosen, we'll just wait, it'll just take a bit longer. It's only probably been 2 hours and it had broken down that much. So I'm thinking probably another 5 or 6 hours and we'll be ready to strain our liquid and then move on to the next step. So it's actually been about 3 days. 3 days of working on my tallow. Okay, so what happened was you saw I got it blitzed and then, well, actually my stick mixer broke. So that was the end of that. And all I did was just keep it simmering away in that crock pot. Okay, then I had something come up in the afternoon. So what I did was I brought the crock pot, I left the alfoil on top and the lid on top, and I just stored it in my spare fridge. And I've been meaning to get back to it, but I haven't been able to until this point in time. So what I've done this morning is I have brought my cold crock pot back outside, turned it back on low, and that's where we're picking up in the video now. So what I need to do now is strain out the fat that's in there. The water will still be in there, okay? And the next step will be then to solidify that fat so that we can separate it from the water. The water will have some impurities in it, and then we can either do the whole process again of melting our fat down with another fresh batch of water, fresh batch of salt, if we need to get more impurities out of it. If the fat comes out of the fridge looking clean, looking good, I don't need to do that next step of the removing impurities, okay? Then we can bottle it up and it's ready to use. So you can do the purifying step, which is that next one, of after it's chilled and separating the water from the fat. You can do that a few times if you need to. Okay, so it's going to depend on the fat that you've gotten your hands on, how much meat was left on it, and if there were other things impurity wise as far as the fat goes. Okay, so where we're picking up in the video is the fat has been outside, it has been melting again on low in the crock pot. I added nothing else to it, and I'm just going to bring that inside now. Here we go. There's the crock pot, and it is still hot. And nothing else has changed, and our fat has continued to render. Now what I do have in here is lots of sort of hard, chunky looking pieces. It's not breaking down, so we're just going to strain it as it is. So as you can see, there are still chunky bits and pieces in there. We're just going to strain this out and go from there, okay? Alright, there's not much left here to continue breaking down. And it has been going all day that day that I started this video, and it has been going all morning, and it's currently about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I feel like we are at the place we're going to get as far as the melting of fat goes. Now you need a large bowl. My colander is sitting over top of that, and we are just separating the liquid, which is the rendered down fat, from the solid. And the smell is something along the lines of boiled meat, okay? That's where we're at as far as smell goes. Now, because this is full, I'm gonna let that sit for a minute while that's sitting there just draining, because what I'm going to do is actually remove and discard the solids that are in the top there, but I need them gone before I can continue with what's in the pot. My bowl is not full. You do need to make sure you have a bowl that's big enough to hold your the fat and the water content. You also need a bowl that can handle temperatures. So you don't want to be using glass if you're going to be putting really hot liquid, which is the fat, into it and then putting that in the fridge. You could cause some kind of thermal shock. Now you can use certain types of plastic. I prefer to use stainless steel. So if you have stainless steel available to you, I would recommend using that. And you can hear my dishwasher going off in the background. That's what that noise is, okay? And we are still dripping. I don't want to lose any of what we have worked hard to render here. So we'll just let that drip for a moment. So I'm just going to dump this into my chicken scrap bowl here. My chickens will finish off anything in there that they want. Okay, and of course you could have poured this whole pot into the colander, but you are dealing with really hot oil, okay? Because what we've done is create oil from solid fat, and it is hot and it will burn you. But this is the process of turning raw animal fat into the product known as tallow. So this is the product that we're left with. That is the rendered fat, the first rendering of it. The water is still in there. You can see there is some discoloration in there still, which means, you know, we will need to purify it, no doubt. I'm going to get this into the freezer so it can set up as quickly as possible, and then we can move on to that next step. I will let it cool just slightly before I do so, though, because it is really hot. So I'll let that sit on the bench for probably 5-10 minutes. I'll clean up some of this mess and then I'll pop that in the freezer. Great thing about making your own tallow or lard or any of these fats is that if life gets in your way, you can keep this in the freezer until you're ready for the next step. So that's what's happened to me twice now. During this video, I've had other things come up and I've had to stop filming, get on with life, and it's been another day. Okay, so we are up to straining out our tallow. This was in the freezer. I've taken it out. As you can see, it then went into the fridge where it has melted any of the water solids. Okay, so what you want to do is over a bowl or a sink, separate the fat from the water. This is sometimes easier and sometimes it's not. So today for me it's going to behave and I'm able to just take that out of there. If you see this brown discoloration here, this means the salt has done exactly what we wanted it to do, and it has drawn any more impurities or beef out of our fat. Okay, so I'm just going to drain that off like so, because you don't want any of that in there. Okay. This now is just pure fat. Now you can see there's a little bit here. The next, but that is ready. You can use that, okay? That is good quality tallow right there. I'm going to give it a quick rinse under really cold water. So I've given this a good rinse under cold water. Now, if you use hot water, you're going to start melting your fat again. But that right there, that is clean and pure, and I'm actually happy with this as it is. That's not discoloration, as in there's no more impurities in there. That's just the fat on the top, and it's got bubbles because it sat there with little particles of salt. However, if you find your fat is not quite up to that standard of purity, you can add an additional step, and that is to basically redo the whole thing again, where you put your fat back into your crock pot, back into your slow cooker, add the same amount of water as we started with and salt, and let that melt back down. Once it's melted back down, we will pour it into another clean bowl. So we would wash this one out, get rid of everything in there. There's impurities in there, there's some fat in there, and there's some water in there. That needs to be a clean bowl. We can restrain it, refreeze it, and do it again. Now that's called the purification process, and you can do that process as many times as you need to until you are happy with the quality of your fat and with the state of the base. So as long as your base is nice and clean, I think you can see it better in that light there. There is no more impurities in there. It doesn't smell of meat, I guess. It's just, it smells like tallow. I don't know how else to describe it. It's not a meat smell anymore. If you do want to do the purification process step, you can do that inside. You don't need to do that one outside because the smell has gone. Now for this, if I want to just store this, I can break it down and put it in a freezer bag, keep it in my freezer. Oil spoils, okay? And if there is any water trapped in, especially these little grooves on the bottom, I could risk it molding, so I don't like to keep my fat on the shelf. Some people do keep their tallow on the shelf in like a mason jar or a canning jar in their pantry. I'm not a fan of it, but that's just me. You can do that too. I keep mine in bottles in the fridge, just my recycled jars just like this. So in order to get my jar of fat, all I did was I cut my tallow brick down and I put it in a jar, and then I just heated it up in some warm water. So I put my jar in some warm water until it melted my fat and it filled my jar. Okay, so that's up to you how you want to store your tallow. You can just wrap it in paper and keep it in the fridge. You can keep it in the freezer, as I said, or you can bottle it into jars and then keep them in the fridge. It's up to you, but that tallow there is now ready for cooking. It's ready for if I would like to make some soap or something with it. That's how to render down animal suet, the raw fat, into a workable, shelf stable technically, although I prefer fridge stable, really healthy. There's a lot of vitamins and minerals in tallow, but yeah, we might make ourselves some more soap out of this one because the smell is very mild. You add some fragrance oils to this and it's going to be really, really, you won't even know what it was made from. Okay. Thanks for spending time with me today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that, you know, if you were wondering how to make tallow, it helped you, inspired you, and that now you can give it a go too. And I just want to say thanks for being here. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for the likes. Thanks for the shares. Don't forget to find me on Instagram. Sometimes I'll add a couple of little extra things on there. And I hope you have a fantastic, fantastic week, and I'll catch you next time. Bye.